Greetings, fellow Astro Geeks. It is your host, Aphilion, and welcome back to the Ephemeris podcast. I realize that I have not used that intro in quite a long time. I knew I said I was gonna do that more often, but I don't know. Somewhere along the lines, just fell out of favor in my head, and then I remembered, oh, you know what? I used to start out the podcast with calling you guys Astro Geeks, but anyways, that's besides the point. Before I get into today's topic, I do want to say once again, thank you for the support on YouTube. I'm seeing the consistent good performance on my videos, and I'm genuinely very happy about that. And today, our episode is going to be about one of the most famous philosophers of all time, Aristotle. And obviously, the amount of work and theory that he did was very exceptional. It's incredible the amount of stuff that he figured out during his time on this earth. But our today, what was I trying to say there? I don't know. But our focus today is going to be more on his astronomical theories, the work he did in astronomy, cosmology. You know the deal, because we're an astronomy podcast out here. I know that's why you clicked on this video. So, what's really interesting about today's episode as well is that we're not required to cover as much of Aristotle's metaphysical theories because it sort of concerns his cosmological ideas a little bit less than some of the other philosophers we have studied, because I think a main theme with a lot of the pre-Socratic philosophers is the fact that they were trying to identify a first root cause, which in itself had to do with the universe, so they had to create metaphysics around that. But Aristotle, I mean, he was all over the place. He was doing stuff in biology, mathematics, so his metaphysics aren't going to be quite like some of the others that we have studied this season. So, yeah, definitely the first time in a while. So, in terms of what is actually in his metaphysics, I think it's basically theory about potential and actuality, and then some basic physics like kinematics and forces. But yeah, again, not extremely relevant. So let's start out with the idea of elements that Aristotle used, and it's not quite uh, so basic. So he believed not in four, but five elements. He believed in obviously air, fire, earth, water, but then he also believed in Aether. And Aether is a very interesting idea. It stuck around in astrophysical theory for quite a long time until, your 7th century and 18th century astronomers came along. What Aether was is essentially a type of matter that only existed outside of Earth. It was a celestial matter, and it didn't belong on Earth, but kind of in the heavens for this time. So the reason why this was important is mainly because of the fact that philosophers at the time didn't have a good way of justifying the universe staying intact in a vacuum. Today we can obviously use Newton's forces, law of gravitation, all of that fun stuff to justify, forces that keep the whole universe in, or not the universe, but the solar system intact. But obviously that is many, many centuries after the work that Aristotle did in Aristotle's time. So the way that he justified it was he created a quantitative law that said that the speed of an object is inversely proportional to the density of the medium it is traveling in. And he applied this quantitative law to natural motion and said, if the universe is a vacuum, like motion in a vacuum is not possible because it kind of relies on density in a way that if you have a vacuum, anything you put in it would have the object would have infinite speed. So yeah, basically with that idea of natural motion, he kind of justified that you can't have a vacuum in outer space and that there must be some kind of matter that holds up the motion of celestial objects. So this warranted a special explanation, and that's why Aether is so important. And if I recall correctly, it did stay for quite a long time. I don't know exactly how long, but probably in the range of a couple centuries. So, before we move on to the motion of celestial objects themselves, I do want to mention that unlike Anaximander, Aristotle thought the Earth was spherical, actually. So, yay, no more cylindrical weirdness. The reasons why he believed so is because he believed that the Earth was the heaviest object in the universe and it gained kind of its place in the center of the universe in that way. And if its mass were to be bound to each other, it would form a sphere. And he also believed Earth was the center of all motion. So, kind of a little bit of a more explanation behind the geocentric model, which we will further expand on today. So, yeah, that's really cool. And kind of the idea of Earth being bound to itself because of its mass is it checks out gravitationally today. And actually, to me, that struck like a tiny resemblance to kind of mass bending space fabric almost. I don't know. Kind of the way that he describes Earth just like gravitating its own mass at the center of the universe. Um, Not necessarily in the context of the universe actually, but if we remove everything from the geocentric picture except the Earth and the Moon, this theory does seem a little bit like how we would explain the Moon orbiting the Earth today. How you kind of um, have this fabric over like a cylindrical container, and then you put like a big ball that's supposed to represent Earth, and then you'd have a little ball that you put in the same fabric that's kind of orbiting around. So yeah, I don't know. I felt like there was um I felt like in my head I imagined a little bit of similarity between Aristotle's explanation and kind of that whole space fabric bending demonstration. But yeah, I also think about the fact that if Aristotle realized that the sun was heavier than the earth, I feel like that would have changed his theory completely. Like, perhaps if he somehow decided, oh, wait, if the sun's heavier, I have to rework this whole geocentric model, and it turned into a heliocentric model, he might have been more advanced than he already was. But that's definitely a stretch, though, because he had many reasons to believe that the Earth was stationary, and he kind of didn't have the right ideas about inertia. So, yeah, again, that's a stretch. Coming from me personally, the resemblance I saw, I thought there's a possibility, but it's very likely not the case. Anyways, other than that, the geocentric model that Aristotle kind of hypothesized contained rings of orbits of the planets and kind of having fixed stars like you'd imagine they made a chart during that time for a geocentric model. And yeah, obviously we've talked about kind of rings of orbits going around the center of the universe with Philolaus, although his was a central fire. And another thing is that Aristotle believed that there were perfectly circular and constant orbits, and this is known as his principle of uniform circular motion, and this does become an important principle, not necessarily interesting, but important principle that even Copernicus refers to and I think agrees with. And so, outside of this realm of circular orbits that is in the geocentric model of Aristotle, that's actually quite a fun phrase to say. He proposed that there was a external spiritual space that is beyond human comprehension, which is interesting. So yeah, that basically sums up the astronomical aspect of Aristotle. But because I mentioned something with Philolaus, I do want to mention a kind of miscellaneous additional thing about Aristotle. A scientific method, kind of, that was known as four causes. And as I mentioned in the last episode with Philolaus, his method of archae or archae, I can't remember how you pronounce it, of kind of identifying three root causes where it's going to influence Aristotle, and we really see that here as we talk about the four causes. So basically, Aristotle suggested that the reason for anything coming about could be attributed to four causes, or four factors. The first would be material cause. So obviously the composition of any given object. And then there's the formal cause, sort of the design or archetype or kind of just general form that the object comes in that makes it unique, right? So form and matter are two things that Aristotle does talk about quite a lot in his metaphysics, and it does appear here as well. So yeah, it's, I guess, form and matter are really important in his sort of scientific causes. And then, so the two other ones are a little bit more complex. The first one is the efficient cause, and it's the agent that kind of creates the object. So basically, a cool example that I've found is sort of identifying the four causes of a table. So the material cause would be the wood, it's made of wood. The formal cause would be its design, kind of, there are so many different designs to a table. It can be very unique. It can be a round table, square table, rectangle table, many different designs. So that would, whatever design it is, would be the formal cause. It's the form that it takes on. And your efficient cause would be carpentry. It is the craft that creates the table. So that's kind of the efficient cause. And then the final cause would be dining, and final cause in general would be sort of the purpose of the object itself. So the final cause for a table would be dining, or for, I don't know, sitting on your laptop and playing games if you have a, I don't know, gaming desk. But anyways, that's besides the point, and those are the four causes that are a part of Aristotle's scientific method of sorts. And that will end today's podcast on Aristotelian astronomy and a little bit of a scientific method, I guess, at the end. It's a little bit of a short one. I think it's possible to condense sort of Aristotle and Plato into one episode, but I'm just gonna keep it separate. I don't think it's too big of a deal if I don't put both in the same episode. And obviously, you gotta give credit to two of the most famous philosophers of all time. So there you have it. If you guys are listening to this episode on Spotify, I would sincerely appreciate a follow. And for the many, many viewers who have been giving me support on YouTube and are not subscribed, I encourage you to subscribe because our episodes come out every Sunday, unless obviously something stupid happens. But yeah, until the next episode, next Sunday, I will see you guys later. Peace.